our courts would be much more sympathetic to hearings of refugees who are facing, 20 life mandatory minimum penalties in the U.S. for crimes that in Canada would get you a ticket or no penalty at all. That's a huge enough difference for our courts to be shocked and to say that we're not going to send you back. And as we know, during the Vietnam War, up to 30,000 Americans, both refugees, draft dodgers, and deserters, came to Canada. 30,000. And I think we could see maybe even more marijuana refugees coming up here. The marijuana issue and the medical marijuana issue is very big, and people whose life depends on quality cannabis, when they see Canada decriminalizing, they'll come up here. And like Renee Bourget, who have never really heard of Canada before she came here, they may discover that actually it's a pretty cool place and we're nice people. So who knows what will happen, but I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of reefer refugees coming up to Canada next year. And if I was an American, I'd be coming up here too, because America's a very scary place these days. And a lot of crazy things are going on down there, and it certainly makes me nervous. And I know that most of my watchers out there are Americans, not Canadians. And to Americans, I tell you, you've got my sympathies, because your country's going crazy. And for when I write articles in the magazine, in my last editorial where I wrote that if America truly wants to demonstrate its moral superiority over other nations, which they claim, the first step to that would be ending the drug war, both in their own country and around the world, which they could do if they decided to make that change. And I also wrote that other countries which claim that America is a warmongering nation while they are more into peace should also look at their own drug policies as well, because really it makes the hypocrites of all nations that claim to talk about peace as the war on drugs. And even though in that editorial I didn't even mention whether or not I thought invading Iraq was a good idea, which I think it's a horrible idea, obviously good for the oil oligarchy, petroligarchy that rules America, but bad for the rest of us. But I got a number of letters, and it's interesting, it's very polarized. The first few letters that came in were like people telling me that I should do more research. They were disappointed in what I had to say. My knee-jerk liberal reaction was unworthy of me and whatnot. Then I started getting a few letters coming in saying, Dana, you've got to tell the truth, and our country does suck, and there's a lot of problems in America. And I don't really think America sucks. That's what people were telling me. But I think that, like any nations, America's got a lot of problems. And because it's such a big country, its problems are manifested in other ways around the world. And because Americans have this propaganda about their own country and this belief that they're the freest country in the world, and that they're always told how free they are and how they fought for freedom and how free they are, and because they're told this all the time, they think their own country is so free, they don't see how their country is becoming less and less free each day. And in fact, America is one of the least free countries in the world, certainly of the Western democracies. Maybe not one of the least free countries in the world, that's an exaggeration, but of the Western democracies, America is one of the least free countries. Certainly more of its own citizens are in jails than any other country in the world. But there are obviously a lot of nations that are more severe than America. But America, for Western democracies, America's got a lot of serious problems compared to other countries, and they're getting worse. They're not getting better, and that's the other scary thing, is that things are going the wrong way in America. And those of you who think war with Iraq is a good idea, and that Saddam Hussein is a greatly evil man and needs to be wiped out, well, there's just so many hypocrisies that I can't even begin to talk about it. But it's a bad scene, and certainly if you're a marijuana smoker, none of this is good for you. Whatever you may think about Iraq and Saddam Hussein being the evil madman we got to wipe out, these changing civil liberties and the increased militarization and police prison state that's happening in the U.S. is not good for those of you who like the fine herb, or anybody who's a free-thinking, open-minded, alternative type of person. And even for the mainstream folks who don't smoke pot, it'll be problems for them too, but the pot smokers will be getting it first. So they're coming after you. So in the new year, we've got to push ourselves harder to achieve the victories that we need to happen so that we can stop this murderous nightmare from taking over America, North America, and the world. And cannabis is going to help us end that and change that and make things better. Not that I want to get too spiritual or crazy about such things, because I have a lot of different ideas about what's really going on in the world, but some of Chris Bennett's research really interests me, and he talks about cannabis being the tree of life and talking about how in the Bible there's prophecies or statements about cannabis possibly healing nations and helping the world to move towards a more positive state. It's very interesting to me that there's marijuana parties all around the world. These political parties are in BC, probably the strongest and biggest one is in BC, but there's the Canadian one, there's the Quebec Bloc Pot, where it was founded in Canada, there's the Alabama and a number of other American ones, there's the UK Legalized Cannabis Party, there's the Ontario Legalized Cannabis Party in New Zealand, there's the Hemp Australia, there's other ones I'm probably forgetting to mention, but the one that may actually get someone elected is in Israel. It's called the Green Leaf Party. And they're polling right now between 3 and 7%, depending on how the poll is phrased and who you ask. And in Israel, they have proportional representation, and you only have to get 1.5% to get a seat in their parliament. And during the last elections, I think they got about 1.3 or 1.2%, something like that. So they were close but no cigar. But if they're polling at 3 to 8, they're only going to get 1.5. That seems like a pretty good error of margin there, possibly for them to get in. And I think it would be astounding positive gesture from the cannabis plant and those who love it if the first person in the world who represents the marijuana culture and the marijuana party, who was elected into a parliament, was happening in Israel, where Armageddon could possibly happen and where so much hate and violence and terrible things are happening in the world. So I think this could be really wonderful. And if you've got some extra money, send it to the Green Leaf Party. I don't have their contact information in front of me, but I'll have their web link on this web page, on the Pot TV page. Contact them, send them some money, send them some support. The website's all in Israel and Hebrew, so I don't know how easy it is to understand, or it all comes up in question marks in my computer anyways, but there's some interesting stuff, and I'll definitely make it so you can contact these guys. Send them money and get them in there, because that's the most important thing I think that could happen in the world today. Well, beyond, you know, George W. Bush smoking up big doobies on the front of the White House lawn and announcing that he's not going to have a war against Iraq, and him and Saddam Hussein are going to sit down and do bong hits together. That'd be a good thing too. But failing that, getting the Israelis, having the Green Leaf Party in the Israel Parliament would be an astounding victory for the world cannabis culture, and a very good sign that we're not going to have a horribly violent end to the world. Well, I think I've gone through all I have to talk about, I guess. It's been a hell of a year. A lot of things I haven't mentioned about what's going on in Europe with England and the people trying to open up coffee shops there, and in Holland, and how the government's trying to shut down some of the coffee shops there. But I think that in the world scene, what we're seeing in many ways is things are going up on both sides. There's more positive things happening with the marijuana culture, and there's more negative things happening against the marijuana culture right now than ever before. Right now, more people are in jail than ever before for marijuana offenses, ever in the history of the humanity. More people are in jail right now. No, right now, because it's getting bigger every minute. So the number of people in prison for marijuana and for these kind of crimes is getting bigger and bigger every second. And yet, at the same time, the marijuana culture is getting stronger all the time. The number of initiatives we've passed in the U.S., the number of victories we've had, the strength of the unified power of our culture, the number of new magazines that are out there. Aside from our German edition, there's 3 other German magazines. High Times has launched Spanish and another German one coming out who knows when. There's a number of English magazines. They're all over the place. Our culture is blossoming, and this Pot TV and our magazine is just really a small part of that. And I think that this is an astounding time for us to be alive, and I think that this is going to go over one side or the other is going to ultimately collapse. It can't build up like that forever. We can't have these numbers going on to ever for both sides. And to me, the one vision is sustainable, and well, this one is sustainable and positive and recycling and going to regenerate our world, and the other one is a destructive path that burns up everything that comes in its way. It's violent and destructive, and while it works in the short term, it is not a long-term solution. And one thing I thought that was interesting, maybe I'll close this show on a thought from Terence McKenna. I haven't really read a lot of Terence McKenna. I just started reading The Archaic Revival, and one thing he says in that book which really struck me was that as human beings, we have a very predatory, animal-like view of the world, in that prey, or most animals, can move from spot to spot, especially predator animals can move from spot to spot especially. So you'll go to an area, you'll use up all the resources, and then you move on. And in nature, typically, the resources will fill in again behind you. The animals and the things that you've consumed will grow back in behind you, because you're not powerful enough to wipe everything out. When humans have done that, yet we still have this mentality that